Welcome to another episode of the Risk and Resolve Pod. Today, we have a very special guest, Jason Starner, who is the commercial team lead here at Connor Insurance. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I've been looking forward to this for the last few months, ever since I heard this was starting. So I'm looking forward to seeing what, hopefully, softball questions you have for me today.
Yeah, lots of softball questions. I've got two of those, and I've got a bunch of fast pitches for you. I've been looking forward to it too, Jason, because, well, first of all, we know each other so well. And so I'm hoping that some of those stories that, we already know about you get shared a little more broadly. But what I'm really hoping for is that I'm able to uncover something I don't yet know about you. So that's my own little challenge.
Good luck. Good luck.
Let's see if we can figure that out. I thought about this conversation, and Jason Starner just equals insurance. I mean, Jason's been in insurance his whole career, been very successful at it. And I think about that early career talent that we look for, that we recruit, that we do hire, to kind of give them a picture as to what at least one person's trajectory and history was in getting into insurance. So take me back to Northwestern Ohio and give me a little glimpse of what 16, 17, 18-year-old Jason Starner thought he was going to do with his life.
16 and 17. I would say early on, quite frankly, I figured I would end up in the banking business because that was the business my dad had been in. So I really felt just naturally kind of looking up to him. I would imagine a lot of children or particularly sons and their fathers do. You just look up to that and think you're going to emulate that and that success in that career path. Out of school at Bowling Green, that's really where I got my first taste of insurance. I majored in finance and international business, and one of the finance classes to take was actually from the CPCU, one of the CPCU books. And that was really my first jump into understanding what insurance was outside of giving my dad $600 every year to pay for my car insurance. I had no plans to go in insurance. It wasn't the path or the trajectory that I thought I would take. But oddly enough, out of school, I would say 90% of the jobs that I ended up interviewing for were either finance companies or insurance carriers. And when it really got down to it, the insurance piece just appealed to me a lot more. And the training programs I was going to go to, and the overall, the roles that I was interviewing for were always in the territory management or sales roles with the insurance carriers. So that greatly appealed to me. Just, I think naturally the pull was there because I'm just a people person. So
what you're saying is we can debunk the myth that Jason Starner, as a high school student, knew he was going to be a successful insurance magnate.
No, absolutely not. No.
So you grew up in a pretty rural area, Defiance. I mean, that's not a big metropolis. Explain what home life was like back in high school days.
Home life, Defiance County had between 18 and 20,000. I still think it probably fluctuate in that area as far as population goes. So it's right between Fort Wayne and Toledo, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Toledo, Ohio. Those were the bigger towns, 30 to 40-minute drive we'd go to if we wanted to go shopping for anything. My father was in the banking business. My mom, she was in the banking business until my brother was born. And at that point, they made the determination to have her be a stay-at-home mom, taking care of my brother, who was 5 years younger than I. Again, insurance wasn't anything that I knew anything more of outside of when I turned 16. That was where my dad started to instill the responsibilities of the financial responsibilities. And one of those was, if you want that car, A, you're going to pay me for it, and B, you're going to pay for gas, and C, it's going to be, here's how much additionally you're costing me every year for insurance. So That was my first look into the space from the very beginning.
Rural area, what kind of farming exposure did you or your family have?
I didn't. We didn't have any farming. The only farming exposure I really had was as a child. I would grow up with. I'd spend a lot of time with my grandfather once quite a bit, and on Sundays, on the weekends, when I'd spend those weekends with him, there was a rather large farm down in southeast Ohio, down in Appalachia, in the Hocking Hills area. And every Sunday we'd go out, do a few things, and we always ended up at this massive farm for breakfast. It was a big dairy farm. And I actually got some experience there with dairy farming, but always had extremely fresh and homemade breakfasts. So that's about the only farming exposure I've got.
So you ended up at a big farm on the weekend in southeastern Ohio. You didn't say Rio Grande, but gosh, it sounds like a Bob Evans farm.
You know, Bob Evans had nothing on this place. I mean, it was homemade ketchup, you know, Fred, their own homemade sausage, eggs right out of the coop. It was legit.
Awesome. So you go to Bowling Green. How did you pick Bowling Green out of all the places?
I just found it to be middle of the road. Through high school, I had initially had my eye on Ohio Northern, much more small and private school, similar probably to like a Taylor here in Indiana, size-wise. I liked that because I just naturally, even though I'm a people person, I naturally have gravitated to smaller things, meaning I'm not a bigger is better type of person. And when I went to tour that campus, quite frankly, it was a very quick no when all they had was a flashing four-way stoplight. I think they had a KFC. I don't know how. And then it looked like somebody put a bunch of brick buildings in the middle of a cornfield and said, let's call this a college. And it, you know, it's 17, 18 years old. I was like, I can't spend 4 years here. Conversely, you know, obviously those that know me, I'm a big Ohio State fan.
Right.
But conversely, Ohio State was just so big. And I just was like that. I knew that really wasn't my fit. So the middle of the road was kind of a MAC school. It's very similar to Ball State here in Indiana. It was at Bowling Green. It was an hour and 20 minutes or so from home. So far enough to where if they wanted to get you, they'd have to call you to let you know they're coming, but close enough to get home pretty quick if you needed to go home and have mom do laundry or something like that.
So 4 years of finance and international business at Bowling Green.
Yep.
You're a senior at Bowling Green. Had you had any insurance internships at all? Or were you kind of going in?
I did not. I had no. The only internship I did work for some family friends that owned a rather decent sized manufacturing company at home. And I actually did a bunch of ground maintenance and things in the summers. They provided a job. They knew my dad. And when one of the owners, Marty, said, hey, you coming back again next summer? I said, no, I need to really find an internship. And his response was, he says, well, you just send me the paper and tell me what qualifications it needs to be to qualify, and I'll make sure it qualifies.
Right.
So I ended up just doing an internship there, working with the lead controller and accounting person there for a summer. Nothing insurance related.
Well, obviously, Ohio, for those that don't know, is the domicile and home state for many insurance companies. So I can imagine going to any Ohio-based college, there's going to be a fair number of Ohio insurance companies recruiting students. Who are some of the names, I guess, you remember recruiting on campus and otherwise?
Well, Todd, quite frankly, when I was in college, I never went to one job fair. Actually, I take that back. I did go to one, and nothing much came of it.
Yeah.
I don't remember talking to insurance carriers. I quite frankly don't even remember who the heck I remember talking to. It just naturally, I do remember sending out resumes galore out of my apartment using my old word processor, and
Yeah.
address, just delete and add. And Lincoln Financial, had at that point in time 3 big offices up in Fort Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
Salina Insurance Group, which is down in Salina, Ohio, which is south of Defiance, about an hour and a half drive or so, was another smaller regional insurance carrier. And there were a few others as well. I remember talking to State Farm. That was a phone interview initially. But most of the others then again were more in the financial, hey, you go to a furniture store and we can finance that business for you, working in an office somewhere doing something like that.
So you approached the latter half of your senior year. Growing up in the household you knew that responsibility was coming your way quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So that freshman in the real world, first job, where do you land? The first person that paid you who we like to say didn't love you.
Yeah. The first job I took was with Salida Insurance Group, a small regional in Ohio, like I referenced earlier. They were primarily personal lines in the farm and agribusiness. That's really their forte. They did commercial as well, but it was more Main Street mom and pop commercial business. So, it was a great start though, because they were hiring at that point in time 4 individuals fresh right out of college to come in and go through a whole year-long training session. So we are in a basement, no windows, one door, no computers, right? And literally insurance manuals and policy forms in front of us, and that's how we learned reading the form. And there were days we'd spent 4 hours on how this one word changed the coverage, and then our tests were, here's the form, here's the question, tell me where and how and why, and that was my training. But that training was training us all to be in the marketing territory rep position. So that was has always been the 15 years I was on the carrier side. That was always those were always the positions I was at. So at Salina, I moved to Acuity Insurance. I was at Salina for 5 years. Primary duties were really agency relations in the state of Indiana. And at a Big I convention, after about 5 years, I'd met an individual at Acuity up out of Wisconsin. And lo and behold, it was about a year later or so, he kept my card and calls me up and says, hey, we have a position opening up. And actually, initially, the position was for a territory rep job in Wisconsin, but that just wasn't going to work at that point with my wife and I. So that ceased conversation. 6 months later, he calls back and says, hey, what if you didn't have to move? We have a position in Indiana. And away that conversation went, and I ended up taking up the same, very similar position with Acuity, from Salina to Acuity. Really the biggest difference there, much bigger carrier. At that point, more of a regional Midwest carrier. Today, they're more of a super regional. The big difference was they were primarily commercial driven, with very, what's small is almost a flip, commercial to personal. So for me, it was a great professional growth opportunity to learn a lot more on the commercial side of the business and really expand my knowledge base there.
Now, what were some of the key takeaways? Because those were a few early career, job opportunities. What do you feel like was like the main takeaway from those early career opportunities, especially in the insurance space?
Takeaways? Well, at that point I was 25, 26, I think, when I was leaving Salina to go to Acuity, and still, that's pretty young. You're still really, I think you're stuck trying to figure out, is this what I want to do with my life professionally? Yeah. Would a move potentially even to a Wisconsin or something else, would that be in the cards for my wife and my family? As you're out there in the field, you just don't, particularly at that point, technology isn't what it is today. So connecting via Team and Zoom and all the fashions that we do today, they weren't there. So the carriers did their best to make you feel part of the group internally, and you get to the home office 3, 4, 5 times a year, but you were still out there on your own on this island. And while I always felt you could make an impact, I always wondered, was the impact enough, and was I being heard and seen enough internally to potentially position myself to make that next move, which would potentially mean I move to a home office somewhere, right? Wisconsin, Columbus, wherever that would be. So I just constantly try to position myself to be in front of the right people and be seen and heard. I went as far, and during one of my jobs, my manager asked me, what's the one thing you need from me? And my very direct answer, as you guys know me, I'm pretty direct. My direct answer was, I need you to train me to take your job. That was, and I quote, and he sat back and says, really? I said, yeah. I said, I'm not out to get you, but I also, in the progress of my career, I want upward mobility, right? And if it's with this carrier or another carrier, it likely would mean a position that he sat in, right? And I needed him to mentor me to help prepare me for that. He understood it completely, and actually was one of the better managers I had.
Can you recall like your mindset or thought process of being early in career and being placed in front of very technical insurance people? How did you like prepare? What was your mindset? Like, can you like recall like that period of your life and what that part of the situation was like?
You know, when you're young like that, you don't know what you don't know. Most people that knew me back in high school would not probably fully, back then, they would have not recognized the confident and seemingly outgoing person that you see today. It was, so there you, I mean, Todd, you want to undercover something that maybe one, it was almost the complete opposite, you know? I wasn't the social butterfly. I wasn't the real talkative one. It was the opposite of what you see today. So being young like that and stepping into a role that was very outwardly facing, walking into agents that you never knew, that had been in the business for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that knew far more than you did technically, it was very nerve wracking. So I approached that initially with Salina. I said, okay, who are my top 4 or 5 largest insurance agents in my territory? And I made it priority one to be in their office nonstop, to get to know them, because I figured, very selfishly, they would likely give me the most amount of time because they had the most business with us, right? So at that point, stepping into there, and I asked them a ton of questions, and a couple of them were just incredibly open doors. And they would, I mean, one of them actually had me work in their agency for the day, answering the phone, working alongside their account managers, just to get a feel for what that operation looked like, which again, technical details continued to come out. And it just continued to build that confidence in myself, in my knowledge base. And as time goes on, obviously you learn more and more and more. And at some point you start realizing, wait a minute, I probably am the smartest person in the room on these details. I'm worried about it, but the odds are I probably know more than the average bear that I'm talking to. So over time, you start to build this confidence, and it just kind of takes a life of its own.
I think that's interesting that and really good advice for early career folks of your answer wasn't like, hey, I tried to just fake it and pretend I knew a lot. You're like, hey, like
Yeah.
I what I can be really good at right now is like relationship
Yeah.
and building that while I'm learning. So I'm going to
Yeah.
lean into something that I can control, that
Yeah.
I can like be successful at with preparation and that sort. I think that is great advice
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot out there, and certainly there's an element that you have to step into the unknown to some degree, right?
Yeah.
And like just figure it out. So not to go through like a whole resume by any means, but you ended up at Philadelphia Insurance, and you you were the expert. Like you knew what you were doing. I don't really share with us like that experience and like that, where you were at in your career, like how many years you've been a professional,
Sure.
and then from there you came over to Connor, and because
Yeah.
that's how we met, is when you're at Philadelphia Insurance as a carrier rep. But just kind of recount that circumstance and like what that transition was like to come to the agency side, and maybe even some like, hey, I thought this about the agency side, but getting
Yeah.
over here, it was actually maybe different or a lot of what I expected. I don't know. You tell us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a couple things. Before I answer that question directly, to your point of the intimidation and being young, and how actually I can tie this directly into Connor, even back in my Salina days. I remember coming into this office, and at that point, of course, you guys weren't here, but because a part of my job at that point was also appointing new agencies to grow the territory. And I walked in to the door, and I walked in and I asked, I forget who was the receptionist at that point, to speak to a principal or a partner. And Jack actually was the one that got the lucky opportunity. And I remember sitting in our conference room around the round table. I can almost tell you exactly where I was sitting and where he was sitting. And I sat in there in those big burgundy chairs, and I'm out of my league. And Jack walks in, and we all know Jack, right? And he, if you didn't know him, of course, in the 20s, it can be intimidating, right? And I remember sitting there trying to go through it, and I thought, this isn't going to work. I'm overshooting it here. So to tie in, it's interesting that I'm now here at Connor Insurance, and I've gotten to know Jack pretty well over the years. Left Acuity, went to Philadelphia Insurance, worked there for 5 years. Same thing in the carrier rep position, which is where I met you guys. A large part of Philadelphia's book. They're the king of the hill, when it comes to nonprofit, social and service business, private charter schools, a lot of things like that. A lot of things that Connor Insurance did then and still does today very well. We write a lot of business and have a lot of relationships in that space. So working with you guys, that's how I got to know Connor. Really, I spent a lot of time, Ben, I know, and with you on Heritage Christian, I believe back then. You were still doing more PNC at that time. But of course, I remember sitting on the round table with the AMs multiple times as well with Karen and Debbie. And Todd, at some point, I think I got to know you working on the Humane Society. I forget what account it was, but that's my intro working for Philly into really getting to know and understand Connor Insurance. And at that point in time, I quickly realized, you do what you say and say what you do. That's the type of people I was dealing with here. And Ben, in particular, your dad, I worked with him on multiple accounts. I quickly realized if I did and I hit this number, here's what you need to do to win. If I did it, 9 times out of 10, I was going to get the win and I was going to write business. So I was in here at least once or twice a month. Sometimes it would just be in the library and I'd talk to a few people. Other times I'd get the whole crew. Oh. But that enabled me, to build incredible relationships with everybody on the team, but also get to understand what it took to grow business. And at that point, I vividly remember, because you were one of my higher growth agencies during my tenure there, we went from somewhere in the $100,000 and some range to well over $1 million book of business, just through building those relationships and that trust factor that we established. So, and then of course I happened to be in here one day, sitting Ben with you and your dad working on a school account, and the opportunities came up, and here I am today.
So about that, were you looking? Were you at a point in your career where you were open to looking, or was it kind of a surprise ask that changed the trajectory of what you were doing?
Yeah, no. I wasn't, was I actively looking? No. I think anybody that has a growth mindset is constantly looking to grow themselves professionally and potentially look at what that next opportunity may be. So from that aspect, I wasn't actively looking, but I'm always listening for that next opportunity. And I believe it was a few weeks before I was actually sitting in Jim, Ben, your dad's office. I think you two were actually at Philadelphia Roadshow over in Columbus, Ohio. We chatted for a bit. Anyway, then fast forward to that meeting in your dad's office. Somebody on the board, your dad had asked, hey, would you be happy to come out and help us present? I said, absolutely. And the person on the board that was coming out from that school worked at Travelers, and I made a meant nothing. Just I said, well, I have to ask them if they're hired. And I remember very vividly, Ben, you and your dad kind of looked at each other, and you got up and left the room and left the office and went to your office. And you came back with a piece of paper from that roadshow. And across, you said, well, actually, and you pointed at the bottom, and it said, recruit Jason Starner. And evidently you told me you two had had a conversation coming back from Columbus about me. So, one, it was very flattering. Two, even more so from the people that were asking me in the carrier rep position, as not just me because I'm special, but most reps, I believe, if you're worth a darn, you're in and out of literally hundreds. I was in and out of, over the course of 15 years on the carrier side, hundreds and hundreds of different insurance agencies, from 2 and 3 man shops in the middle of the farm country to the largest brokerages in the country. You're approached often with, hey, have you ever thought about this or thought about that? We'd love to talk to you. And quite frankly, it's just for one reason or another, a lack of trust, understanding how they treated their employees, knowing how they treated and interacted with their clients. For whatever reason it was, very, very, very few were ones that I would have ever considered to take a job. And, when that opportunity popped up that day with you and your dad, again, I know you guys have heard this, but I remember right where I was parked outside, I walked out to my car and I to myself said, that could work. And that was kind of the start of what led me here today.
That was what, 10 years ago?
I'd have been probably about 12, closer to 12 years ago.
Yeah. One of the reasons I think that you and I get along so well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons actually, but one of them is we both have a passion for that early career talent. And you look at our team, we have some early career talent, but we also have some seasoned talent, which you need a balance of both.
Yep.
And of course, you and I talking about welcoming early career talent to the team is at our own jeopardy as we get closer and closer to being not even anywhere near the definition of early career talent.
Well,
from your standpoint, what does that phrase mean, and why is it important for any agency to focus on that, to build systems and means to attract those individuals into the industry?
I think a lesser confident person at 49 years old would sit there and be worried about it. But as part of the team now, I used to use Ben, your dad, on occasion to pull gray hair into the meetings with me to have gray hair. Well, I've had now 2 people on our team pull me into meetings for that. And I'm like, okay, so we've entered that phase of life.
Yeah.
It's actually quite humbling that they look to you for that. And it's a great responsibility that we have to, whether it's our own children or the people here at work, right, to do that. If you're not growing, where are you going, right? You're dying on the vine. So for that growth, we need to continue to recruit young career talent. And I think all too often, in my opinion, young career talent with a lot of people gets associated with somebody right out of high school or college, right? Yes, they're young, but that may not be young in their career, right? Maybe they're 30 years old and they've done something else for 10 years,
Yep.
But they've made that transition and said, that's not it. Insurance is for me now. That's where I want to go. I've learned enough. That's my trajectory. I would still consider that young career talent, right? Now we start to get into our 50s. That may be a little different story, but I think it's incredibly important that we do that. I myself, over the years, and I still enjoy it to this day, greatly going out, whittling through an opportunity and leading it to the close and the yes. But I think, as with most people, as you get older, your bucket gets filled also by helping others to become successful. And in imparting your wisdom, it's, of what you've learned, your experiences and shared experiences with them for them to compete or compete in the marketplace and to win personally and professionally. In my bucket, I would say is probably about half full between going out and still getting wins and that. They're probably about 50-50 right now with where I'm at in my career.
Yeah,
and some of that enter too, Todd, because being a father as well greatly changes your perspective on life, personally and professionally.
Yeah, you're managing current accounts, prospecting new business, managing a team, which involves not just the people part of it, but the processes, and even just this week getting into different accounting details. And so you're getting the full spectrum of it. Over my shoulder here is that ship, and we oftentimes use that phrase, burn the ships. Have you burned the ships yet? When you started here, third generation had not yet purchased the agency, but you're smart and you knew what you were looking at. And so while Jim was very much in the room and Jack was involved and Tom was involved, you knew that you were coming on to a team that was not going to be led by them long-term, but by us. Was there a point in those last 10 years, 12 years where you proverbially had to burn the ships on any other plan B in your life, where you said, no, this is it. This is where I'm going to do it. I'm going to make all my dreams and hopes and dreams come true here. Was there a moment like that?
I don't know if there was quite frankly, that moment probably was best when I finally got the nerve up to accept the position to come here, quite frankly. As you're aware, you made the offer to me sometime in like May, and I didn't start till October. And you and I, and you were extremely patient, which again told me you were looking for the right person, not just to throw bodies at the wall and see who's stuck, right? Yep. And that was actually a question I asked you, Ben. I said, well, how many people are you talking to? What's the list look like? And where am I at? You're like, it's a list of one. It's you. But again, no matter who I talked to, I got the same message, right? And it was about the person and it was about the fit. So you take that along with, it was very clear that, the third generation was going to come in, of which I more relate to age-wise. And in conversations and meetings that we had, I knew the trajectory that you guys wanted to take this thing, right? And I specifically remember I would love to be a part of that ride. So in 15, 20 years, we look back and say, wow, that was incredible. And, and I could somehow, at that point, whatever my role would be in that, I mean, I take extreme pride in where we've gone even in the last 11 years since I've been here. So yeah, it took a lot of nerve for me to make that choice. And I took a pay cut to do it. It was very nerve-wracking, but I looked at it as an investment in myself, greater control over my time. And at that point, of course, we were pregnant with our first, with Solaire. So it gave me greater control over my income. It gave me greater control over my time. And aligned better with me personally and missionally with where I needed to go. So really, quite frankly, if that probably was the time I burned the ships, because as I've said, this was my retirement plan, right? Invest in it, see it through, make it work, because if it works, hot diggity dog, things could be good, right?
Yep.
So, and knock on wood, things have been great.
Jason, I think you have just an incredible talent for not only clients and consulting and helping them navigate decisions around, risk and risk transfer as it relates to insurance. But you also are a student of the game, and you just know what you're doing. Just a phenomenal consultant in that. Like, how did you get to this spot of honing those skills relationally, but also technically so well?
I say this all the time. What we do isn't rocket science. It's not. Most of it comes down to just pure relationships. Listening, being empathetic, let people know they're heard, showing up, when you and say what you say what you're going to do and do what you're going to say. And the rest, I feel naturally, if you do those things and focus on those things, I think a lot of the other stuff just naturally falls into place, right? You clearly in our roles need to then add in the technical expertise of insurance to make it all function. But I think I would like to think that a large part of the reason why I've been able to either gain new relationships, maintain the current ones, and just in general, even with the team here internally, keep things moving is because I feel that those are my strengths that I excel at. And I think the people that are around me see that it's a very sincere and empathetic approach that I take to it. And if you do that and you educate your clients, you communicate regularly with them along the way, don't bring surprises to them, and you just do it through building, on the foundation of your relationships, things just will naturally take care of themselves.
What do you wish C-suite leaders knew about, like what's missing that C-suite leaders need to know, I guess, about the approach to insurance that you see that they might be missing in your interaction of like, man, this relationship could be better, but their mindset isn't right. Like, what would you tell employers around mindset and engaging with their agent or their insurance advisor?
One word comes to mind initially would be transparency. Going back over the different places I've been, along with the different managers I've had, and I would honestly say transparency. And I believe a large part of that, I think I've gotten the most of it by far and away here, particularly with you, Todd, right? You've always been it's like I say, you're the Wizard of Oz, but you pull back that curtain, right? And that allows me to understand the inner workings of what's going on, and that led us to the decision to get us there. And then how my piece or my team member pieces work in that. And then I understand that picture of how to make it work for the greater whole. Some places they don't, right? It's just, hey, here's our number. If you need to write $4 million in new business this year, they give you no consultation. They don't ask you your opinion on, hey, what are the agencies doing? What do you see in the market? It's just more throwing it at you with no real explanation. And then you're sat there trying to kind of backfill it with very little explanation as to why or input this into why. So I think that's something that here with our team that we're very good at. And in turn, I try to do that, all the way down, even with the rest of my team members. So there is no question. Like, this is it, right? So, and I try to be that way with my clients. Very transparent with them. If I leave that meeting or that office space and they walk away scratching their head on whatever it is, then I've missed the mark and I've not done my job.
Well, I know one of the things you do really well, and I know this because we ask our clients, after renewals what they think. And one of the things they oftentimes talk about is the way that you and the account managers you work with share with our clients and our prospects the state of the market.
Mm-hmm.
And, these are people in businesses doing other things. They don't know if it's restrictive or open season. For those that are listening to the podcast, here we are sitting in Q1 2025. What's a brief update on the commercial property and casualty market?
Yep. I do one for every one of my clients at renewal, and even provide them updates throughout the year if I happen to be on a phone call with them, whatever. A lot of it is, again, Todd, it's just the education and being transparent with what's going on. I tell them I think it's important you understand what's going on nationally or even in our world globally in the insurance marketplace, because it all trickles down to the end user, right? The person buying a home or car, the business owner, et cetera. So the current market today is we're still in a hard market, right? Pricing continues to still push up. That started late in 2019. So carriers are still chasing their tail and trying to increase their profitability. The biggest changes I tell my clients right now that is occurring is the percentage of increases that carriers were looking for compared to 4 and 5 years ago, back in 2020 to today, is coming down. So that's good news. The other major thing is the lines of coverage that is driving the bigger portions of the increases has shifted. Back in 2020, it was a lot on initially with COVID. It was directors and officers and your management liability and cyber liabilities and some of those things that were driving that. It shifted over time once COVID and the freaking out that everybody did. Once that started to calm down and the industry started to realize, okay, we're going to be fine from that. At that point, then property ramped up really fast. Property is still there. There's still pushes on ITVs and deductibles and things, but the overall rate increases are starting to trickle down and get smaller. Carriers and publications you're starting to hear the buzzwords, rate adequacy a lot in that space. Yep. Additional capital flooding into that space, which means at some point reinsurance treaties they sign with will ease up, and that should ease up for all of us. Really, the biggest thing right now that's ramping up big time are general liability, just liability claims in general. So, you hear terms like nuclear verdicts, millennial juries, depending on the coverage line, some statutes of limitations have been waived in many states, allowing things to go back. So, these verdicts and even the investments made to bring these lawsuits, it's absolutely insane for what it takes to settle some of these claims these days.
Let's fast forward a number of years. You're at the end of your professional career, and you're deciding to hang up the gloves. We've talked about where you've come thus far. What are some things that are you want to make sure you accomplish between now and you say goodbye to the insurance industry?
Yeah. I still don't really know what that looks like. You think about it, glimpses here and there. You think about it from a timeline standpoint, that 49 years old, I'm a lot closer to retirement than I'd like to be. Is that another, could I do it another 10 years and call it quits? 15 years, 20 years? I don't know timeline-wise what that looks like. I enjoy what I do, and I don't know. I can't just sit at home.
No, you cannot.
Yeah. So initially, my thought on the timeline is I'm gonna play this out until I physically or mentally probably can't do it, or you guys will say, get out of here. Because I, quite frankly, again, it's not rocket science. If you like what you do, and I do, if you like who you're doing it with, and that involves our team here at Connor as well as the clients you're doing it with, it's not really a job, right? You hear it all the time. So I could see myself doing this another 20, 25 years. Where at, over time, I could see myself though spending more time at the lake or doing it from a different location remotely here a little more often. Or in a different remote location in Florida, maybe Todd sitting on the porch with you somewhere, on a farm making maple syrup. I don't know.
Could be anywhere.
Yeah, I could see myself doing it from different locales. But
Well, you bring up a good point, is that this industry allows smart, experienced, intelligent people to stay in it a long time.
Yep.
And, that's one of the concerns I have about just the amount of people retiring. And I get it, they're at retirement age, but there's a lot of brain drain that's happening. Why I'm so passionate about bringing on those early careers to capture as much of that knowledge as possible, because like, we benefited a ton from the gray hair that was here before us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm hoping to do this for a long time. I'm hoping I don't have to really think about that. And like I said, as long as I feel I'm adding value to the clients and the team in some way, shape, or form, and it may be in a different capacity at that point, 15 or 20 years, then I likely want to be involved in helping to do my part.
I have a question before Todd ends us with our two standard questions. What advice would you give your 22-year-old self? Just kind of looking back of what you've experienced over the last many years of professional experience. What would you tell yourself?
First thing I would probably tell myself is don't be so darned afraid of taking more risk.
Yep.
Again, going back to burning the ships and that decision to make the jump from the carrier to the private side here, it was a big decision. Again, it took me 5 months to get up the nerve to do it. And I wish, I've told people before, I wish I would have done it earlier in my career. Knowing what I know now, I wish I would have done it when I was 25, 30. I mean, for a multitude of reasons. But again, you don't know what you don't know. And, we're quite frankly, again, we're not in control, right? There's a path that's already set for us, and we just got to do our best to navigate that path. And we're along for the ride, But if looking back, I would tell myself, take more risk. Don't be afraid to take some risks. And you may lose, you may fall, you may set yourself back a step or two, but take that risk a little bit more often, because you just don't know where that potentially could lead to. And it could just take off, or it may not, but you're going to learn something from it that likely will set you up for more success down the road.
That's perfect, Jason. I think those that know you on the team and clients they probably already know every single bit of this podcast information, because you are so transparent. But on the point of taking a risk, you have always been very good to remind people that you're there with a pretty big safety net for them, which encourages people to kind of move into that risk, which brings us perfectly to our two questions that we like to ask everybody. First question. I think I might know what this is, but we'll see. You might throw a curveball. What is a risk that you have taken that has changed your life?
We've covered that. Really, it was go back to the burning of the ships and making that. I can't exaggerate how big of a deal that was for me. And the sleepless nights I had trying to make that decision to go through the comfort of knowing the carrier side for 15 years.
Yeah.
And what that entailed financially, et cetera, and making that jump into, I'm going to work for commission. What? Right. That was by far and away it, right? But if I wish I would have taken that risk earlier and knowing what I know now, but
it all worked out.
It's worked out. And looking back on it, you guys have heard me say this, it was the best thing that I did, not knowing it at the time. Personally, professionally, spiritually, for a multitude of reasons. Looking back, it was like, that was the right time. And I understand now why it was the right time.
What's unfinished that you have the resolve to complete in the near future?
What's unresolved is honestly not, we have the vision and we have the plan here, right? We set these goals for our firm and each department and each team. So what's left unfinished is seeing that through.
Yep.
Bringing in the new talent, educating them, mentoring them, passing along what we can to them to achieve those goals, while also nurturing and being empathetic and helping those that have been here for a long time play their career out here as long as they want to be here, because that's the foundation that we've got to build on, right? I would say that's what's left unfinished. And how my role looks in it, I mean, I know what it is today, but that's going to change, right? We have to learn and change and adapt, each one of us, as we add another 10, 15, 25 employees to our staff. That's what's left unfinished.
Great answer. Thanks for your time, Jason. Thanks for your dedication to the team and the team members, the clients. If anybody doesn't know, I receive all the feedback from your clients, and there has never, ever, ever been a disparaging comment from any one of the customers. It's always been super positive. So it's always fun to get them and to send them to you and be like, here's another winner, you know? So we appreciate and enjoy and love that you take care of the customers so well. And of course, in your role as the commercial lines department lead, that you take care of the team so well. That's almost more important. And so thanks for that. And thanks for your time today.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.